He found a young widow sleeping beside his horse, then heard her whisper his late wife's name. John had been walking the familiar countryside trail for years, but today everything felt different. The morning mist hung low over the fields, wrapping the landscape in a quiet, almost magical silence. Each step he took stirred the damp grass, and the soft sound of hooves behind him reminded him of the steady presence of his horse, Dusty. The chestnut mare had been his companion since his wife Anna had passed away 6 months ago. Since then, Dusty had become more than a horse. She had become a friend, a reminder that life, even after loss, continued to move forward. John's mind wandered as he guided Dusty along the narrow trail. He remembered Anna's laughter echoing through this very countryside, the way she would lean against him, her hand brushing his arm as they walked together. Those memories were bittersweet, sharp at times, but today they felt heavier than usual. The ache in his chest reminded him that grief never truly leaves. It only changes shape. The trail curved near a small grove of trees, their branches stretching like arms over the path. John's attention shifted when he noticed a movement at the edge of the clearing. Something, or someone, was lying on the ground, half hidden by the mist. At first, he thought it might be a deer or some other animal resting in the cool morning air. But as he drew closer, the shape took on a distinctly human form. A young woman was sleeping beside Dusty, her head resting gently on the damp grass. Her dark hair was spread around her like a halo, and the soft folds of her cloak were muddied from the dew-soaked earth. She seemed so fragile, so small against the vastness of the countryside, that for a moment John felt a pang of protectiveness he hadn't known he could feel for anyone else. "Excuse me," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. There was no response. He stepped closer, noticing the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she slept. The wind carried a faint scent of wildflowers and rain-soaked soil, and for a moment John allowed himself to breathe deeply, letting the peace of the morning fill him. Something about her felt familiar, though he couldn't quite place it. Perhaps it was the curve of her face, or the way her hands rested near her heart. His gaze fell on a small locket hanging around her neck, catching the first rays of sunlight. It glimmered, small and delicate, as though holding a secret inside. He felt a strange pull toward it, a curiosity mixed with caution. John's first instinct was to leave her be, to assume she needed privacy and rest. But the longer he watched, the more uneasy he felt. There was a vulnerability about her that tugged at his heart. It wasn't just concern for a stranger. It was something deeper, almost instinctual. He had learned over the months of living alone that the world could be unpredictable, that people could find themselves in danger when least expected, and he couldn't just walk away. Gently, he kneeled down beside her, careful not to disturb Dusty. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. There was no movement, no answer. He glanced at the locket again, then back at her face. Her eyelids fluttered slightly as if sensing his presence, but she didn't wake. John looked around the clearing. It was early, and the countryside was quiet except for the occasional chirping of birds and the soft rustle of leaves. There were no signs of danger, no footprints indicating that she had been followed. She was alone, and that alone concerned him. He didn't know her story. He didn't know why she was here, or why she had fallen asleep beside his horse, but he felt a responsibility to make sure she was safe. He reached out slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She stirred, letting out a soft, barely audible sigh, but her eyes remained closed. Then, almost imperceptibly, she whispered something. John's heart skipped. Her voice was soft, fragile, almost ghostly, and the words she spoke made him freeze in place. Anna. The name hung in the misty morning air, delicate yet weighty. It was a name John had not heard aloud in 6 long months. Anna. His Anna. The thought that this young woman, stranger though she was, had spoken it made his chest tighten with a strange combination of grief and confusion. He blinked, wondering if fatigue or imagination had conjured the sound, but when he leaned closer, he heard it again, a whisper, almost like a prayer. John sat back slowly, unsure what to do. His mind raced with questions. How could she know Anna's name? Was it coincidence? Fate? Or something he could not explain? There was a surreal quality to the moment, as though time had slowed, and the world had narrowed down to the three of them: John, the woman, and Dusty. For a few minutes he simply watched her, the silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. He noticed the faint trembling of her hands and the pale flush on her cheeks, signs of exhaustion or perhaps fear. His own grief mingled with concern, and he felt a strange urge to protect her, even though he did not know her. He considered waking her fully, speaking to her directly. But then he hesitated. There was something sacred about the way she slept, something unassuming and gentle that deserved respect. So instead he stayed close, keeping a watchful eye as Dusty shifted her weight and nickered softly. As he observed her, John's mind wandered to his own solitude since Anna's passing. He had spent months wandering these trails alone, speaking to no one but Dusty and the memories that clung to every path and stone. Yet here was someone, unknown and vulnerable, resting beside him as though she belonged. The thought unsettled him in a way he could not explain. It was strange, unfamiliar, and yet comforting. After some time the woman stirred again. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the soft morning light. There was confusion in her gaze, a silent question that mirrored the one in John's own heart. He offered a gentle smile, hoping to convey that she was safe.
"Good morning," he said softly. "You've been sleeping here a long time."
"Are you all right?" The woman sat up, wrapping her cloak around her shoulders. Her movements were careful, almost hesitant, as though she were unsure whether to trust him. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but there was a hint of fear. I'm fine," she murmured. "I didn't mean to bother anyone."
"You're not bothering me," John replied.
"I was just worried. It's unusual to find someone sleeping in the middle of the trail, especially here." She nodded, her eyes meeting his with a fleeting intensity. I needed to rest," she said. "I've been traveling a long distance, and I didn't know where else to go." John studied her carefully. Her story was vague, but there was truth in her voice, an honesty that didn't need embellishment. He decided not to press further, at least, not yet. For now, the important thing was that she was safe and unharmed. "Do you need water? Food? Anything?" he asked. "I can bring some from the farm nearby." The woman hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Water?" "Yes, please," she whispered. John smiled, standing up and patting Dusty. "Stay here. I'll be right back." He walked briskly toward the farmhouse in the distance, leaving the morning mist and the sleeping woman behind. Every step he took felt surreal. Only moments ago, he had been alone, lost in memories of Anna. Now someone new had entered his life in the most unexpected way. As he carried water back to the clearing, he could not shake the feeling that something significant had begun. The whisper of Anna's name lingered in his mind, a gentle echo that would not fade. It was a moment that felt both ordinary and extraordinary, a simple encounter that seemed destined to alter the course of his days. When he returned with the water, the woman was sitting quietly, Dusty nuzzling her shoulder as if to welcome her. John handed her the cup, and she drank slowly, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said softly. Her eyes met his again, and John felt an unspoken understanding pass between them. Neither of them could explain it, but there was a shared recognition of loss, of longing, of something more profound than mere coincidence. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the misty fields, John knew that this encounter would stay with him forever. The morning had begun like any other, but it had transformed into something remarkable, something that would challenge his understanding of grief, of fate, and of human connection. For now, he simply sat beside her and Dusty, letting the silence speak, letting the moment exist, without the need to name it. And in that quiet he felt the first stirrings of hope, tiny, fragile, but real, that life could still hold surprises, and that perhaps, even after loss, new beginnings were possible. The young woman sat quietly beside Dusty, the early morning sun warming her face and making her dark hair shimmer in the light. She seemed smaller now that she had woken, as if the world itself was too large for her to fill. John watched her carefully, noticing the faint tremor in her hands as she held the water he had brought. There was something haunting in her expression, a sadness that seemed almost familiar, and yet he could not place it.
Where are you from?
John asked gently, unsure if he should ask more personal questions so soon. The woman hesitated, her gaze dropping to the ground. I was traveling, she said softly. I didn't really have a home to go back to. I've been moving from town to town trying to find, I don't know, a place to rest. John nodded slowly. He could sense her honesty. There was no pretense in her voice, no attempt to impress or manipulate. Just a tired, wandering soul who had been carrying too much on her own. Something about her reminded him of the quiet strength his late wife had carried, the kind that was rarely seen by strangers but unmistakable to those who loved her. Traveling alone can be dangerous, John said, keeping his tone gentle, especially for someone so young. Were you attacked? Or
Hurt in some way?
The woman shook her head quickly. No, not exactly, she said. I just needed to leave. I needed to get away from everything for a while. I didn't have anywhere safe to go, and I didn't want to bother anyone. You're not bothering anyone, John replied firmly.
At least, not me. And you certainly don't have to hide from me.
You're safe here, for now. There was a pause, and the woman's eyes flicked up to meet his. Something unspoken passed between them, a fragile trust, the beginning of a bond that neither of them fully understood. John could not explain why, but he felt a protective instinct rising in him. It was unfamiliar, yet comforting, as though fate had placed her here at this exact moment. I'm John, he said finally, extending his hand. You can tell me your name if you want. I won't pry. I just want to make sure you're safe. The young woman hesitated again, then slowly took his hand. Elena, she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost like a breeze brushing over the grass.
Elena Parker. Nice to meet you, Elena, John said gently. I know you've had a long journey, and I don't want to overwhelm you.
But would you like to come with me to my farmhouse? You can rest properly, have a proper meal, and we can talk more there. Elena nodded slowly, relief flickering in her eyes. She stood carefully, brushing the damp grass from her cloak, and followed John and Dusty along the trail. The mist was beginning to lift, revealing the green fields and rolling hills that stretched as far as the eye could see. Birds chirped in the distance, and the warmth of the sun gradually replaced the chill of the morning. As they walked, John could not help but notice small details about Elena. The way she held herself, cautious yet resilient, as if she had learned to protect herself through experience. The subtle grace in her movements, the quiet way she observed the world around her. There was a story in every glance, every gesture, though she shared little of it.
Where exactly were you coming from?
John asked carefully, not wanting to push too hard. Elena's lips pressed into a thin line, and her gaze dropped again. I can't really say, she murmured. It's complicated. I just needed to leave. I had nowhere else to go, and I couldn't stay where I was. John nodded, sensing that pressing for details would only make her uncomfortable. Instead, he offered reassurance through his presence, walking beside her in companionable silence. Sometimes he realized silence could speak louder than words. By the time they reached the farmhouse, the sun was higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields. The small wooden house stood quietly among tall trees, smoke curling gently from the chimney. John opened the gate and Dusty trotted eagerly toward the stable, as if she understood that this place was safe and welcoming. Make yourself comfortable, John said, leading Elena into the kitchen. The room smelled of fresh bread and herbs, the kind of comforting scent that made one feel at home, even in the most uncertain times. He filled a small bowl with water and placed it before her, then prepared some bread and cheese. Elena ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it had been too long since she had felt safe enough to eat properly. John watched her quietly, noting how fragile yet determined she seemed. He could sense that she had been through much more than she let on, and yet there was a quiet resilience in her. After a while, Elena finally spoke. I heard something this morning, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. When I woke up, I whispered a name. John's heart skipped. He remembered that name, his breath caught in his chest. Ada? He asked carefully, trying not to sound too startled. Elena nodded, her eyes wide with surprise and confusion. Yes, how did you— It's my late wife's name, John said quietly, his voice trembling slightly. I haven't heard it spoken in months.
I don't understand how you know it.
Elena looked down, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I don't know, she admitted. It came to me. I was dreaming, I think, and it slipped out before I realized.
I didn't know anyone named Anna. I didn't mean anything by it.
John studied her face, searching for signs of deception. There were none. Only honesty, and something deeper, something he could not name. He felt a strange mixture of grief and wonder, as if the universe had placed Elena here for reasons beyond explanation. You didn't know my wife, he said slowly, trying to calm the storm of emotions rising in him. But somehow, you spoke her name? That's remarkable. Elena looked at him, fear and curiosity mingling in her gaze.
I didn't mean to upset you, she said. I don't know why it happened.
I was half asleep, and it just came out. John nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over him. Perhaps it was coincidence, or perhaps it was something more. Either way, he realized that the moment mattered less than what came next, the chance to connect, to share space, and perhaps to heal in ways neither of them expected. Over the next few days, John and Elena began a careful routine. She helped with small chores around the farmhouse, feeding Dusty, collecting firewood, and tidying the rooms. In return, John provided her with meals, warm clothing, and the kind of kindness that spoke louder than words. As they worked side by side, an unspoken bond began to form. There was no rush, no expectation. Just two people, each carrying their own losses, learning to trust each other slowly. John found comfort in her presence, in the quiet way she listened when he spoke about Anna, in the respect she showed for the memories of his late wife. One afternoon, as they tended to the small vegetable garden behind the house, Elena paused and looked at him thoughtfully. You loved her very much, she said gently, her voice soft but steady. John nodded, a lump forming in his throat. Yes, he admitted. More than I ever thought possible. Even now, I feel her absence every day. Elena placed a hand on his arm, a gesture of simple understanding. It's hard to lose someone you love, she said. I know what that feels like too. John looked at her in surprise. She didn't elaborate, but her words carried weight. He realized that perhaps their shared understanding of loss was what made their connection so profound. It was not about replacing the past. It was about finding solace in the presence of someone who understood the depth of grief. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, they sat on the porch in silence. Dusty rested nearby, and the world seemed to hold its breath. John felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. Elena had not replaced Anna. Nothing could. But her presence was a balm to his weary heart, a reminder that even after loss, life could offer moments of unexpected beauty and connection. Over the following weeks, John noticed subtle changes in Elena. She became more comfortable, more open, though still careful. She laughed quietly at times, a sound that warmed his heart. She shared small stories of her travels, never revealing the full extent of her past, but enough to hint at a life shaped by both hardship and resilience. John, too, began to open up. He spoke of Anna more freely, telling Elena about the little things he missed, the way she sang while cooking, the sound of her laughter, the warmth of her hand in his. It was not easy. Grief has a way of clawing back even when you think you are ready. But sharing these memories with someone who listened without judgment made them feel lighter, less like a weight pressing on his chest. And through it all, the whisper of Anna's name remained, a delicate reminder of the past, lingering between them like a quiet thread, binding old memories to new beginnings. Days passed slowly at the farmhouse, but each one felt richer than the last. John and Elena settled into a quiet rhythm, their days filled with small chores, shared meals, and long walks along the fields. The seasons were beginning to change. The air carried the crispness of early autumn, and golden leaves drifted lazily from the trees. The countryside seemed alive, yet calm, offering a sense of peace that neither of them had felt for a long time. Elena was learning the ways of the farm, though she moved with a quiet hesitancy, as if afraid of doing something wrong. John noticed this, but he never criticized or rushed her. Instead, he guided her gently, explaining how to care for Dusty, how to tend to the vegetable garden, and how to collect firewood safely. She listened carefully, absorbing his words with a mixture of gratitude and quiet determination. One morning, as the mist lifted from the fields, John noticed Elena staring at something far away. Her eyes were distant, clouded with thought, and for a moment, she looked almost haunted.
Elena?
He asked softly, approaching her. She blinked and turned toward him, forcing a small smile. "It's nothing," she said. But John could tell it was far from nothing. There was a weight in her expression that begged to be shared.
"You can tell me," John said gently. "I don't want to push, but I want to understand."
"You don't have to carry it alone." Elena hesitated, then took a deep breath. I've been trying to forget my past," she admitted. "I ran away because my life was complicated. Things happened that I couldn't control, and I had to leave. I had to escape."
John nodded, encouraging her to continue.
He could sense the truth in her voice, and he knew that the only way she could find peace was to speak it aloud.
"I was married,"
Elena said quietly.
"Very young. My husband,
he died suddenly. There were things left unsaid, and I couldn't bear to stay in the place where it all happened. I didn't know where to go, so I just kept moving. Walking. Sleeping wherever I could." John felt a pang of empathy. He understood grief. He had lived with it every day since Anna's passing. He could imagine the weight of her loss, the emptiness that follows when someone you love is gone too soon. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice, only let her speak and be heard.
"I didn't mean to whisper your wife's name," Elena added, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know why it happened."
"I wasn't thinking. It slipped out. And then I saw your face. And I don't know. Something felt familiar. Something about this place, about you, reminded me of her." John looked at her, searching her eyes. There was honesty there. Pain and confusion mingled with a gentle strength. He could see the struggle between wanting to move forward and being trapped by memories. He knew that healing takes time, and that trust is built slowly, not forced. "You don't have to explain yourself fully," he said finally. "You've been through a lot, and for whatever reason you're here now. That's what matters."
Elena nodded, letting out a small sigh of relief.
"Thank you," she whispered. I've never met anyone who would listen like this before." John felt a warmth spread through him. He had spent months in solitude, thinking he would never open his heart again. Yet now, he realized that understanding and compassion could grow in the most unexpected ways. Over the next week, John and Elena's bond grew stronger. She became more comfortable in the farmhouse, more confident in her steps, and even began to laugh quietly at times. John noticed these small changes and felt a flicker of hope. It was not a replacement for Anna. It could never be. But it was a reminder that life could offer second chances, even in the midst of grief. One afternoon, while working in the garden, Elena paused and looked at John with a question in her eyes. "Do you ever wish you could see her again?" she asked softly. John's heart tightened. The question was simple, but the answer was complicated.
"Every day," he admitted.
"But I also know that I have to keep living. I have to honor her memory, and that means finding ways to keep moving forward." Elena nodded, her gaze distant. "I understand," she said quietly. "I feel the same way. I miss him, my husband, every day. But running away didn't help. I just carried the pain with me. John placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Facing the past is never easy, he said, but sometimes it's the only way to heal. You've been brave, coming here, speaking your truth. That's more than most people could do. Elena smiled faintly, a small but genuine smile. Thank you, she whispered. I think I'm ready to stop running now. That evening, as the sky turned shades of pink and orange, John suggested they take a walk to the old oak tree at the edge of the property, a place Anna had loved to sit when she wanted to think. Elena agreed, curious to see the place that held such significance for him. When they reached the tree, John paused, letting the silence stretch between them. He could feel the weight of memories in the air. The laughter, the tears, the love that had once filled this place.
Elena stood quietly beside him, sensing the reverence of the moment.
I used to come here with Anna, John said softly. We would sit under this tree for hours, talking about everything and nothing. It was our special place. Elena nodded, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. It's beautiful, she said quietly. I can see why she loved it. John took a deep breath, the memories flooding him with both joy and sorrow. I sometimes wish she were still here, he admitted. But I also know that she wouldn't want me to stop living. She would want me to find happiness, even if it's different from what I had with her. Elena looked at him, her expression gentle. I think she would be proud of you, she said softly. And I think you've already found a little happiness again. Even if it's new, it's real. John felt a lump form in his throat. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. He realized that she was right. The moments he spent with Elena, quiet, small, and ordinary in some ways, had brought warmth back into his life. They were not a replacement for Anna, but they were a reminder that life could still hold meaning, still hold connection, even after loss. Over the next several days, Elena began to share more of her story, though cautiously. She spoke of her early marriage, the love she had felt, the sudden loss of her husband, and the way she had wandered, trying to escape the pain. John listened without judgment, offering only understanding and companionship. In turn, he shared memories of Anna, speaking of her kindness, her laughter, and the small ways she had brightened his life. Through these exchanges, they found a strange but comforting symmetry. Both had loved deeply, both had lost, and both were learning to navigate life without the ones they had cherished. There was a quiet understanding between them, a bond born from grief, yes, but also from hope, compassion, and the possibility of new beginnings. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace in the farmhouse, Elena asked a question that made John pause. Do you think it's possible to love again, John? Looked into the flames, thinking carefully. I don't know, he admitted honestly. But I do know that it's possible to care deeply for someone even while keeping the past alive in your heart. Love doesn't have to be replaced. It can change, grow, and take new forms. Elena nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. I think I understand, she said softly. I'm ready to try to live again. To feel hope again. John felt a warmth spread through him. It was a quiet, steady feeling, not the fiery passion of new romance, but something gentler and stronger. Trust, companionship, and the quiet reassurance that life could continue, even after unimaginable loss. The days turned into weeks, and as the autumn deepened, so did the bond between John and Elena. They shared quiet moments in the fields, worked side by side in the garden, and found solace in each other's company. Neither of them rushed. There were no demands, no expectations, only a shared presence and a slowly growing connection. Through it all, the memory of Anna lingered, not as a shadow, but as a guide, a reminder of the love that had shaped John's life and the capacity of the human heart to heal. Elena's past, too, was honored, not erased, as she began to find strength and courage in a place where she had once felt lost. And in that quiet, unspoken way, they both began to understand that life, with all its pain and beauty, could still offer moments of grace, even after loss. The whisper of Anna's name, the fragile trust between them, and the slow unfolding of their connection became the bridge from grief to hope. A bridge neither had expected, yet both had needed. The days grew shorter as autumn deepened, and the farmhouse was bathed in a soft golden light each morning. John and Elena had fallen into a rhythm that was calm but meaningful. Their mornings began with tending to Dusty in the garden, their afternoons with small chores around the house, and their evenings with quiet conversation by the fireplace. In the simplicity of these routines, both found solace they had not known in months, or, in John's case, years.
Elena had grown more confident and comfortable in the farmhouse.
Her steps were steadier, her laughter more frequent, and the shadows of fear and exhaustion that had once haunted her face were beginning to fade. John noticed it with a quiet satisfaction, knowing that healing is often slow, fragile, and earned in small moments of courage. One morning the sky was pale with the early light of dawn, and the air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves. John had been preparing breakfast when Elena entered the kitchen, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the edge of the fields. She placed them carefully in a jar on the windowsill, their colors bright against the soft morning light.
"They're beautiful," John said, smiling. "You always notice the little things, don't you?"
Elena shrugged, her lips curving in a faint smile.
"I guess I've had a lot of time to notice," she said quietly.
Time to think about what matters. John nodded, feeling a deep sense of connection. There were many things about Elena he did not yet understand. Her past, the full weight of her grief. But he did understand that she was kind, honest, and brave, and that mattered more than any detail of the life she had left behind. After breakfast, they decided to take a walk to the river, a place John had visited with Anna countless times. The riverbank was quiet and still, reflecting the colors of the sky in ripples of gold and silver. John led Dusty along the narrow trail, Elena walking beside him, her hand brushing against his arm occasionally for balance. When they reached their favorite spot, John paused, letting the silence settle between them. The memories of Anna were strong here, and he could feel them in every sound of flowing water, every rustle of leaves, every bird call in the trees. He looked at Elena, who stood quietly, her eyes reflecting the same reverence he felt. "This is where I used to come with Anna," John said softly. "We would sit here for hours, talking about our dreams, our plans, or sometimes just nothing at all. It was our place of peace."
Elena nodded, understanding without needing more explanation. "It's beautiful," she said.
"I can see why you loved it so much." John smiled faintly, a mix of sorrow and warmth in his eyes.
"I still do," he admitted.
"And coming here now with you, it feels like sharing that peace again. Not replacing the past, but adding to it in some small way." Elena's hand brushed against his, a gesture of understanding, comfort, and connection. She did not speak, but her presence said more than words could. She had witnessed his grief, shared her own, and now stood beside him as someone who understood both sorrow and the fragile hope of new beginnings. As they sat by the riverbank, Elena began to speak about her future. "I've been thinking," she said softly. "I don't want to keep running. I want to stay here for a while, not because I'm trying to replace anything you've lost, but because this place, and you, make me feel safe again. I can breathe here." John felt a warmth spread through him, a quiet reassurance that life could still offer moments of grace, even after the deepest grief.
You welcome here, Elena, he said gently.
"I don't expect anything of you except to be yourself, and maybe, if you want, to keep sharing this peace with me." Elena's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she smiled. "I'd like that," she whispered.
"I'd like that very much." Over the following weeks, their days became richer. Elena helped John prepare for the winter, gathering firewood and stocking the pantry, while he taught her how to care for the small flock of chickens that had begun to wander the farmyard. They laughed together when Dusty playfully nipped at Elena's cloak, or when a chicken chased them around the yard. These moments, ordinary yet profound, became the threads weaving their lives closer together. One evening, as the sky turned deep orange and purple,
John and Elena sat on the porch, watching the first stars appear. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. John felt a quiet courage rise within him, the kind that only comes from truly embracing life after loss.
"Elena," he said gently, "I've been thinking about what you said, the idea of love again,
And I realize that it's not about replacing what we've lost. It's about honoring it, remembering it, and letting ourselves feel something new alongside it.
I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I'm grateful for your presence in my life."
Elena reached for his hand, holding it gently.
"I feel the same," she said. "I've been afraid for so long,
Afraid to trust, to hope, to care again. But now, with you, I feel like I can start living again, and maybe even feel happiness again." John felt a lump in his throat, but it was not sorrow. It was the profound emotion that comes from recognizing life's second chances. They sat together in silence, letting the night sky stretch above them, knowing that they had found something rare and precious: peace, companionship, and the quiet promise of a shared future. In the following weeks, John and Elena began to explore the countryside together. They walked along winding trails, discovered hidden meadows, and shared stories under the shade of ancient trees. Sometimes they spoke of Anna and Elena's late husband, honoring their memories with tears, laughter, and quiet reflection. These moments became part of their healing, a way of acknowledging the past without letting it dictate their present. One particularly crisp morning, John suggested they plant a small garden by the river in memory of Anna and Elena's husband.
"It doesn't have to be large," he said. "Just a little corner where we can remember them and celebrate the life they gave us, even for a short time." Elena's eyes softened, and she nodded.
"I'd like that," she said. "It feels right." Together they dug the soil, planted seeds, and watered them carefully. It was slow, deliberate work. But with each seed, each touch of soil, they felt a sense of connection, not only to those they had lost, but to each other and the life they were building.
As the days passed, sprouts began to emerge, delicate green shoots pushing toward the sun.
It was a quiet reminder that growth and renewal were possible, even after deep sorrow. John began to notice small but meaningful changes in himself, too. He smiled more easily, laughed more freely, and found joy in the ordinary rhythms of farm life. He no longer felt the crushing weight of solitude as he had after Anna's passing. Elena's presence did not erase his grief, but it made it lighter, more bearable, and even meaningful. One evening, as the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, they sat by the fireplace once more. Dusty lay curled at their feet, and the wind whispered softly against the windows. John took Elena's hand in his, feeling the warmth of her skin against his own. "Do you ever think about the future?" Elena asked quietly. John considered the question, gazing into the flames. "I do," he said finally. "I think about it a lot, and I've realized that I don't have to fear it anymore. Life will bring challenges, of course, but I want to face it with you. I want to build something meaningful, something steady, alongside someone who understands and cares. That feels like hope." Elena smiled, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I feel the same," she said. "I don't know what the future holds, but I want to face it with you too." It was a quiet, simple promise, yet profound in its sincerity. Neither of them spoke of grand plans or rushed into declarations. They simply acknowledged the bond they had formed and the trust they had nurtured. It was a beginning, not a replacement for the past, but a continuation of life's journey, enriched by understanding, compassion, and shared experience. As the winter deepened, their days were filled with quiet joys. They prepared meals together, read books by the fire, and cared for Dusty and the small farm with gentle patience. Sometimes, when the wind howled outside, they would sit together in comfortable silence, drawing warmth not only from the fire but from each other. Through it all, the memories of Anna and Elena's husband remained alive, not as shadows, but as guiding lights. They whispered their names sometimes, shared stories, and allowed themselves to feel gratitude for the love that had touched their lives. And in doing so, John and Elena found that grief could coexist with hope, Loss could coexist with joy, and the past could coexist with the promise of the future. One late afternoon, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, John and Elena stood by the river once more. Dusty nuzzled them gently, and the water reflected the colors of the sky like a mirror. John took a deep breath, feeling a profound sense of peace.
"Elena," he said softly, "thank you. For being here, for trusting me, for helping me remember that life can still be beautiful after loss."
Elena smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "And thank you, John," she said, "for giving me a safe place, for listening, for showing me that hope can exist even after grief. I feel like I can live again." They stood together, hand in hand, watching the river flow and the sun dip below the horizon. In that quiet, shared moment, they understood that life had brought them together for a reason, not to replace the past, but to honor it and to embrace the possibility of new beginnings. And in the stillness, with the soft murmur of the river and the whisper of the wind through the trees, John and Elena found something rare and precious. A chance to heal, a chance to love again, and the courage to face the future together. Life had tested them, challenged them, and shaped them with loss, but it had also offered them grace, companionship, and hope.
And as the stars began to appear in the clear night sky, they both knew that they were ready to move forward, not forgetting the past, but carrying it with them as they stepped into a brighter, shared tomorrow.